everybody, welcome back to T's Theses. I have missed you guys. It's been over 2.5 weeks since I posted my last video. One reason for that was I took a 7-day East Caribbean cruise, and the other reason for that was when I got back, I was sick. So it took me a while to get over my sickness, but now I'm back and I am happy to say that I am feeling much better. However, while standing in line waiting to speak with customer service after they canceled our flight, I spoke with someone who suggested a book to me. And today's book is entitled Verity by author Colleen Hoover. And the book was suggested to me by this person because she stated that she liked women who were in situations where they were a hot mess. You know, those were the types of books that she likes to read. And because I wrote a book about a woman who was kind of in a hot mess, I thought that this might be something good for me to read. However, after reading the book, I wasn't that impressed. I'm sure a lot of you out there have probably already read this novel. Colleen Hoover is a very well-known author. If you go into any bookstore, you can find her books on display. And from what I understand about the story, it deviates from the types of stories that she's written in the past. And as I said, I wasn't that impressed. For any of you who have read this book, to be honest, once Lowen got to the house, you already knew what was going to happen, right? For anybody who's read any book written by V.C. Andrews, the plot was already written for you. You already knew when she got there how everything was going to unfold. It was just obvious. But for those of you who may not have read Verity, in the story, we meet a woman by the name of Lowen, and Lowen is an author, and she's a pretty decent author. However, she's kind of an introvert, and she doesn't like getting out there and branding herself. She doesn't like going on tours. She doesn't like meeting her audience. She's worried about how she will be portrayed to her readers, and that kind of stunts her growth as an author. And Lowen is at this point in her life where she's really in need of money. Her mother has been sick and she's been taking care of her, so she hasn't been able to write recently, but she's about to be put out of her apartment. However, luckily for Lowen, she's run across this great opportunity. Unfortunately, the woman, Verity, who is the title of this book, she is also a writer. She's a very successful writer. She has 7 books in her series, and there are 3 books left to complete. And Verity has had a car accident, and she's not able to complete her collection. And Verity's publishers, they need someone to complete her stories, but they don't want her audience to know that Verity is not working on her books. So Lowen gets this opportunity to help complete Verity's manuscripts. And because the publishers don't want anyone to know that Verity is incapacitated, they're allowing the public to believe that Lowen is co-writing this book with Verity. But because Lowen is an introvert and doesn't want the publicity, she's not using her name. She's going under a pen name, and she doesn't want people to know that she is the one that is co-authoring this book with Verity. However, because Lowen has not read any of Verity books, she finds herself in this situation where she has to go to Verity's house with her husband and her young son and go through Verity's manuscripts and see if Verity has already started an outline of these last 3 books in her series. However, while Lowen is there, she ends up having this connection with Verity's husband, and they start feeling things for each other. Also, while she's there, she finds this manuscript, this autobiography written by Verity in Verity's desk drawer in her office. And when she begins to read this manuscript, she begins to find out that she doesn't like Verity very much. And she believes that Verity, at the time before her accident, was harmful to her family. We find out in the story that Verity and her husband, they lost their twin daughters. And it starts to look like from this manuscript that Verity might have something to do with the death of her children. And so as the story unfolds, Lauren begins to question whether or not Verity is actually incapacitated or not. Because as we find out that there's nothing technically wrong with Verity, that she's not paralyzed, that she is basically, the doctors are saying that something happened to her in her accident and she's basically sort of a vegetable, but there's nothing that the tests are saying is wrong with her. And so as I said, as the story unfolds, you kind of know what's already going to happen. You already kind of have a clue that maybe Verity is faking her illness and something is going to happen between Lauren and Verity's husband. And what we think is going to happen does happen. And one of my biggest issues, other than the fact that I already knew what was going to happen in the story, is this long, drawn out, I felt unnecessary ending to the story. In the story, as I said, we find out that Verity is faking her illness. And her husband becomes enraged because he feels like Verity was faking her illness because of what she did to their twin daughter. And in my opinion, once this part of the story unfolds, once Verity faking her illness comes to light, I feel like the story should have been done then. I think that as a reader, I got my closure when I found out that Verity was faking her illness, that Lauren and Jeremy eventually get together. I feel like the story should have ended there. I didn't need to know what happened once Lauren and Jeremy got together. I didn't need to know how Lauren began to compare herself to Verity. I mean, we already got a sense of how Lauren felt about herself, how some of the things she did in the story I found a bit distasteful. And so I didn't need to find out later on how she was comparing herself to Verity, how after reading the manuscript about Verity and Jeremy's sex life, how she was constantly comparing herself to his ex-wife. For me, it kind of felt like the author felt the need to, a lot of times where readers like, oh, I wish I knew where they were now. To me, it felt like the author felt like she needed to give us that. And as I said, it was unnecessary for the story. With this big buildup of whether or not Verity was faking her illness, we got that closure. We didn't need to see where they are now. I said, I don't really know what Colleen Hoover, I don't know what types of stories she's written before, but for me, Verity was very lacking. I mean, I get the idea of wanting to read a story about women who have issues, but as I said, I already knew what was going to happen, and I didn't like any of the characters. And the thing is, I'm a believer that you don't have to have empathy for your characters. You don't have to have empathy or relate to any of the characters in the story for it to be a good story. But I just didn't like them, and I didn't really care to find out what was going to happen to them. And maybe that's why I didn't need the where are they now. That concludes today's video. Any of you out there that read Verity, let me know your thoughts on the story. So until next time, you guys take care, stay safe, and try to do something nice for a stranger so we can all do our part to make this world a better place.